I still remember the day I stood in front of the door that used to be my home. In my hand was an old cloth bag. Inside were only a few clothes and a framed photo of my late husband. The new lock gleamed, reflecting a face that looked old, tired, and unfamiliar. I knocked. No one answered. Then my son's voice came faintly through the crack of the door. "Mom, I changed the locks. Linda said you should call first if you want to come over." I froze. The cold wind cut through my hair. I whispered, "I didn't come to stay. I just wanted to drop off some food for you two." But the door never opened. I heard the sound of Linda's heels approaching, her voice low and cold. "She needs to learn to respect boundaries, Ethan." Boundaries? This house was built with my own hands, every brick soaked with my husband's sweat. And now, I stood outside, listening to someone else teach my son about boundaries. I walked away in the rain, my steps heavy. I didn't know then that just a few weeks later, that very house would burn to the ground. And through the roaring flames, a scream would pierce the night. "Mom! Mom, help me!" I ran toward the fire like a madwoman. Because no matter how many locks they changed, I was still the only one who could hear my son's cry for help. If your heart aches hearing this, maybe it's because you too have been hurt by those you love the most. Then this is where you belong. Here on Voices of Auntie Tae, every story is a slice of real life. Tears, pain, but also forgiveness and hope. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss any of our emotional family drama stories, where we listen, heal, and believe that love still exists in every home. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I truly want to know how far these stories travel, and if this story touched your heart, please share it. Because somewhere out there, someone may need to hear a family drama story like this to believe in love again. Now let's return to that night, to where the fire began. When Ethan was a child, he never let go of my hand. After my husband died, I became both mother and father, working night shifts and teaching him math problems after dinner. On rainy nights, I'd ride my old bike 2 kilometers just to bring him a hot meal at his dorm. He once said, "When I grow up, Mom, you'll never have to work hard again." I believed that promise for years. But when Ethan married Linda, everything changed. Linda was young, beautiful, worked in advertising. Her words were polite, but her eyes carried quiet arrogance. I tried to love her like my own, cooking, cleaning, keeping the house spotless. But every time I did something, Linda had an opinion. "Mom, no one uses cheap dish soap like that anymore." "Mom, please don't let that herbal smell fill the house. My friends will hate it." Ethan usually stayed quiet, then whispered to me, "Mom, please understand her. She's just used to a different way of living." I swallowed my tears. I didn't want to make things harder for him. But slowly, the line between their home and my home grew sharper. Linda began locking the kitchen cabinets, keeping separate dishes for the two of them. She told neighbors I was too sensitive and old-fashioned. One morning, while I was making tea, I heard them arguing in the living room. Linda's voice was clear and cold. "I can't take this anymore. I need space. I can't live with your mother forever." Ethan was silent for a long time. I stood behind the door, my hands trembling. Finally, he said, "All right, I'll talk to Mom. I'd know." That evening, he sat across from me, looking uneasy. "Mom, maybe you could stay somewhere else for a while. Linda's under a lot of stress. When things calm down, I'll bring you back." I smiled, though my heart felt hollow. I simply said, "Okay, I understand." 3 days later, I returned to the house to pick up a few things. The locks had been changed, without warning. I stood there for a long time, holding my old bag, listening to their laughter inside. It felt as if I had never existed. I walked to the park. Light rain was falling. A small sparrow huddled beneath a bench, soaked and trembling. I looked at it and thought, maybe I'm just like that bird. I rented a tiny room on the outskirts of Charlotte. Every night, I sat by the window, watching the lights of the old neighborhood from afar. I didn't hate them, I just felt an emptiness so deep it chilled me. But life has a way of waking us up, because just a few weeks later, that same house, the one I'd been pushed out of, would be swallowed by fire. And on that terrible night, I would once again hear my son calling my name like he did when he was little. That night, Charlotte was wrapped in the first cold winds of winter. I sat in my small rented room, beside a pot of cold tea and an old newspaper. Outside, drizzle fell softly. The wind howled through the cracks, sounding like a distant cry. I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was a mother's instinct, a strange heaviness in my heart, as if someone far away was calling me. Near midnight, the wail of fire trucks echoed through the city. Sirens cut through the rain. I stepped out onto the balcony and saw flashing red lights in the distance. My heart stopped. That street, Maple Street. The street where my house, Ethan's house, still stood. I threw on my coat and ran, slipping through alleys, mud splashing on my legs. The wind was freezing, but one thought burned in my mind. Please, don't let it be my house, please, no. When I arrived, the entire street was glowing orange. House number 21 Maple Street was engulfed in flames. Part of the roof had collapsed, black smoke curling into the sky like a serpent. Neighbors shouted, "Chaos everywhere." Someone yelled, "There are still people inside. They haven't all made it out." I pushed through the crowd, trying to get closer. A firefighter stopped me. "Mom, you can't go in. It's too dangerous." But then, amid the roaring fire and crashing tiles, "De Jotter Rexbouter dot." I heard a sound that froze my soul. Mom, help me." It was Ethan. The same son who had changed the locks on me weeks earlier. Through the smoke, I saw him trapped upstairs, coughing, pounding on the window. I didn't think. I ripped off a tarp, climbed over the fence, and ran straight into the burning house. Someone behind me screamed, "She's crazy. Shang, chat GPT dineds." The heat of the fire scorched my skin. The smoke burned my eyes. I crouched low, covering my mouth with a damp cloth. Inside my head, thousands of memories echoed, the day I first held Ethan, his first steps, the day he promised to protect me when he grew up. Each word, each image, blended with the roar of the flames. I screamed through the thick smoke, "Ethan! Answer me, son." A weak cough replied. I followed the sound, climbing the creaking wooden stairs. The air was so heavy with smoke it felt like it would swallow every breath. Then I saw Ethan's arm reaching out from the debris. I rushed forward, grabbed him hard. "Mom, sorry," his trembling fingers clutched at mine, barely a whisper. "It's okay, son. Don't cry. I'm here. I tried to pull him out from under the rubble. With every step, I heard wood collapsing behind us, flames licking up the walls. Just as we reached the front door, a loud explosion erupted. I threw myself over him, my back searing in pain. Then someone dragged us out. I didn't know if it was a firefighter or a neighbor. Everything spun. Shouting voices, rushing water, chaos. I only remembered Ethan collapsing onto the grass, coughing violently while I fell beside him. Flashing ambulance lights cut through the smoke. I heard someone shout, "They're alive! Get them to the hospital!" Before I lost consciousness, I looked at the house. The home that had once been my refuge, the place that had shut me out. Now nothing but a blackened frame, flames reaching toward the sky like a warning from heaven. And through the haze, I heard that same voice again, echoing like a wound that would never heal. "Mom?" When I woke up, the sharp smell of disinfectant filled my lungs, and the steady beeping of a heart monitor rang in my ears. My throat was dry, my skin burning, every breath slicing through my chest. The ceiling light above me was cold and white. I was in a hospital. A nurse's gentle voice broke the silence. "You're awake. You're very lucky. We got to you just in time. Your son's in the room next door." I slowly turned my head. Through the thin curtain, I saw Ethan lying motionless, his face wrapped in white bandages, hands covered in gauze, smoke marks still dark on his neck. My heart twisted in pain. I tried to sit up, but the nurse rushed over. "Please don't move yet. Your burns are still severe." I nodded weakly, but my eyes never left my son. As long as he was breathing, that was enough. The next afternoon, Ethan woke up. The first thing he saw was me. In that moment, between us, there were no more locks, no more cold doors, only silence between two people who had lost and just found each other again. "Mom," his voice trembled, hoarse and weak. "I'm sorry." I said nothing. I just took his hand, the same hand that once held mine when he was small. Rough now, but still warm. He continued, voice breaking. "I heard you calling me in the fire. At first I thought it was a dream. But then I really heard you. I don't understand how you could risk your life after everything I did. Why did you come back for me?" I smiled softly. "You're my flesh and blood. People can change locks. They can shut me out. But no one can ever lock a mother's love. Tears ran down his face, and mine. For the first time in years, my son looked as small and fragile as he had when he was a boy. A few moments later, the door opened. Linda stood there, pale, hair messy, eyes swollen from crying. She looked at me, then at Ethan. She said nothing, but in her eyes, I saw fear, guilt, and regret. I felt no anger, only a quiet sadness, like ashes after a fire. "She's the one who saved him," the nurse whispered, trembling. "If she'd come any later, neither of them would have survived." Linda burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Ethan gripped my hand tighter, as if afraid to lose me again. I spoke slowly. "Fire can burn down a house, but it can't burn away love. Remember that, son." Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his cheeks. Outside the window, the afternoon sun glowed softly, casting golden light across our faces, a new beginning rising from the ashes. And I knew from that very moment that the fire hadn't just destroyed our house, it had burned away pride, ego, and the cold distance that once separated us. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. My arms still bandaged, my steps still weak, but my heart felt lighter than ever. Ethan came to pick me up, not in Linda's fancy car, but an old one borrowed from a friend. As he opened the door for me, he bowed his head and said quietly, "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to start over, from the beginning, Mom." I looked at him and saw true remorse in his eyes. The cold, distant man I once knew was gone. In his place stood the boy who once feared the dark and held my hand when crossing the street. Our old house on Maple Street was now just a pile of blackened rubble and twisted beams. When I stepped closer, my legs froze. The air still smelled of smoke, the ground wet from recent rain, and everything that once made up our home now lived only in memory. Ethan stood beside me, silent for a long time, then whispered, "I want to rebuild it, Mom, not just the house, but everything between us." I turned to him and nodded. "If you truly mean that, I'll help you." "I know." From that day on, we worked together every morning. Ethan shoveled the dirt, and I picked up every brick that was still whole. Neighbors stopped by, some brought bread, others paint, all moved by the sight of us working side by side. Mrs. Jenkins, who once saw me turned away from that house, hugged me and said, "See, the fire burned everything, but it didn't burn kindness." I smiled, tears falling, but they no longer felt bitter. One afternoon, as the sunlight slanted across the empty lot, Linda appeared. No makeup, no arrogance. She stood still, watching us quietly, then stepped forward. "I have nothing left to say except I'm sorry." Ethan turned to her, sadness in his eyes. I simply replied, "Every house needs to be cleaned before it's rebuilt. Go live your life well." Linda's tears fell, and she walked away without looking back. I knew life would find its own way to heal her too. A month later, the new house took shape. Not grand, not luxurious, but warm. I replanted the rose bush by the porch, the kind my husband once loved most. Ethan helped me hang the family photo, its edges charred by fire, but our smiling faces still intact. That night, as I poured tea, Ethan sat by the table and whispered, "Mom, thank you for never giving up on me." I placed my hand on his shoulder and smiled. "I only did what any mother would do. Just remember, no door can ever lock out true love." Outside, a light rain began to fall. The sound on the roof of our new home was like a gentle song. Inside me, the old fire had gone out, making room for another kind of light, warm, steady, and kind. Since we started rebuilding the house, I've seen Ethan change little by little. No more late nights, no more forced laughter at dinner. He wakes up early, makes coffee for me, then goes to work at a nearby construction site. It's not as prestigious as his old office job, but I know this is how he's trying to make up for what was lost. One morning I stepped onto the porch and saw him wiping down the old wooden table. Sunlight touched his tanned face, his forehead wet with sweat, but his eyes were calm in a way I hadn't seen before. I asked softly, "Are you tired, Ethan?" He turned and gave a small smile. "No, Mom." I looked at my son and felt tired and happy at the same time. Maybe loss isn't always an ending. Sometimes it's life's way of forcing us to relearn one word: appreciation. After the fire, Ethan lost everything: the house, his job, and the wife he once took pride in. But only at rock bottom did he begin to value the little things he used to dismiss my home-cooked meals, a hot cup of tea on a rainy evening, a warm home even if it was only temporary. At night, we sit on the porch, listen to the crickets, and talk about the old days. Ethan said, "I used to think happiness was a nice house, a fancy car, a beautiful wife. Now I know it's just sitting next to you, listening to you talk, and knowing I still have a chance to do the right thing." I went quiet. Simple words, but they cut deep. Another time, Ethan brought home a paper, an application for a small company in the city. "I don't want to go back to the old place, Mom," he said. "I want to start over somewhere new, where no one knows how arrogant I used to be." I looked at him and said only, "Do whatever brings you peace." On his first day, he wore a shirt I ironed, rolled up the sleeves, and took the lunch I packed. When he came home, he told me about kind coworkers and hard but happy hours. I saw the light return to his eyes, the light that had gone out long ago. One afternoon, I accidentally overheard him on the phone with Linda. His voice was calm, no blame, no anger. "I forgive you. We were both wrong, but I don't want to go back. Please live well." He hung up and saw me standing there. I only asked, "Are you okay?" "I'm okay, Mom. I've learned that some people come into our lives just to teach us a lesson." I smiled. My son had finally grown up, not with money or status, but with compassion. By the 3rd month after the fire, the house was finished. Not luxurious, but solid. In the living room, Ethan placed a new frame. A photo of the two of us on the porch, hand in hand, roses blooming behind us. Under the photo, he taped a small note in simple handwriting. "No door can lock out a mother's love." On the housewarming day, neighbors gathered. Everyone was moved to see us plant a small "Home Sweet Home" sign by the door. An elderly man said, "That fire didn't just burn things down, it lit up human kindness." That night, I brewed tea and poured him a cup. Warm light fell across his face. I asked, "Ethan, if you could go back, would you change anything?" He gave a sad smile. "No, Mom. Without those mistakes, I'd never understand how much you mean to me." I squeezed his hand and said softly, "Life can burn everything down, but if love still burns in your heart, you can light up the whole house again." Outside the window, the wind brushed through the rose garden. Petals fell in the night, but the fragrance stayed like a mother's love, quiet, enduring, and impossible to destroy. One early spring morning, mist still veiled the small roofs along Maple Street. I opened the door and breathed in deeply. The scent of damp earth and roses mixed in the air, the familiar smell I thought I'd lost forever. Our home was no longer a ruin of the past. It was a symbol of a new beginning. Ethan was in the yard, hoe in hand, working and whistling. He looked the same, but his eyes were different, no longer cold or distant. In them was the peace of someone who had lost everything and learned to be grateful. Seeing me, he smiled gently. "Mom, I planted a few more rose bushes. I remember you said that when roses bloom in spring, it's a good sign." I answered warmly, "Yes, son, and I think this year our home will have many good signs." We sat on the old wooden bench Ethan had repaired. The sun rose slowly, laying gold across the leaves. A sparrow perched on the railing and sang softly. Peace, the thing I thought I'd never find again, was so clear it took my breath away. Ethan spoke slowly. "I think a lot about that night, Mom. If the fire hadn't happened, I might never have seen how foolish I was. I thought you were a burden, a barrier to my happiness. But when the smoke covered everything, the words, 'Mom,' were the only thing that made me want to live." My eyes blurred not from sadness but from joy. The boy I raised with love had truly grown up. In the afternoon, neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Jenkins brought an apple pie and laughed. "I've never seen a house look brighter after a fire than yours does now." I smiled and replied, "That's because it's built with love, not just bricks and wood." When they left, Ethan and I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the room gold. He asked, "Mom, did you ever hate me?" I shook my head. "No. I only regret that you had to suffer to understand a mother's heart. But sometimes only fire can melt the ice." Outside, the last light of the day glowed on the wall. I heard the wind slip through the porch, carrying the scent of newly bloomed roses. Everything was quiet, simple, and strangely sacred. Ethan turned and took my hand. "Thank you, Mom, for not turning away, even when I once locked you out." I smiled and held his hand back. Thank you for finally opening the door with your heart. Night fell. I wrote down this story not to blame, but to remember that sometimes, inside the fiercest flames, there's a light strong enough to lead us back to one another. And if you're listening to this, maybe you've faced a fire of your own, a loss, a slammed door, a loved one turning away. But remember, true love never burns out. It only sleeps, waiting to be awakened when we dare to forgive. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment below, because every share from you becomes another living story in a world full of emotional family drama stories. And don't forget to hit subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more deep family drama stories, each video a reminder. No matter how big the fire, the human heart can light the way again. Tonight, sitting by the window, I watch a small candle flicker on the table. Its light makes me think of that fire, the one that burned everything I had, yet also lit up a mother-son love gone cold. Life may change, but love does not. It waits to be called by name through smoke and darkness. If you're hearing these words, believe this: no door can lock out true love. And that's why Voices of Auntie Tae always tells family drama stories that reach the heart.